A chorus I was going to say, because what he did for others, he can do for you. Now we're going to see that in today's scripture, story of Jesus coming back for Thomas. What he did for others, he did for Thomas. So could you show us that slide, please? And the title of the sermon is, I Want Some. I think that's probably where Thomas was coming from. I want some of that. I'm sorry that I missed. And it's important to remember that fresh, ongoing encounters with Jesus are a necessity for us. We can't have fresh faith unless we have fresh, ongoing encounters with Jesus. So getting more of Jesus is what we're talking about this morning. If you've got your Bibles there, you can follow along a little bit. We're in John chapter 20. Still John chapter 20. I was thinking this morning, that Dana does a much better job at getting good-sized text than I have been doing. This looks a little smallish. Is it smallish for you guys? Not too bad? I'm going to beef it up just a little anyway next week. John chapter 20. Dana, could you show us the next slide? This is Thomas speaking, and Thomas said, unless I see, this is going to be our key verse, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it. So really what Thomas was looking for was his own encounter with Jesus. He wasn't going to settle for that somebody else got it. He wanted it. And by way of introducing this sermon, let me say that I have a concern that for some Christians, and I would include myself in this, some Christians who have been on the road a long time, we've been journeying a long time, and we might lose interest from time to time. Now I know we have some songs that say it gets sweeter as the days go by, and we go from glory to glory, and I know that, but I've also just observed that sometimes we lose interest as time goes by. Maybe because we've been over so much ground, and maybe because a lot of that ground is very familiar to us, which it is. We have heard that before. Maybe we can, lose interest. It would be interesting, don't you think it'd be interesting to sit down one time and just take a few minutes to calculate how many sermons have I heard? And you might go easy, just do easy math, like just say 50 per year, because you did have the cold that one time and the flu the other time. So, and how many Bible studies? Well, you've heard a lot, but we don't want to lose interest. So because fresh, ongoing encounters with Jesus are necessary for fresh, ongoing faith. And speaking of losing interest, I like what Walter, you and I hope we could become lifelong friends. He talked about working at it. At some point you got to work at it. And I resonate with that on this point. And in terms of the ongoing encounters, you got to work at it sometimes. So a little bit of our story. When we were up there at the ranch, Circle Square Ranch, Sherry and we actually stopped going to church for a while. Very young, just newly married. It had to be, 83, 84, something like that, 1983 or 4. And now our usual thing was that we had retreats come every weekend to the ranch, and that's a big part of our ministry. And Sherry was kind of like the hostess with the mostest, and she helped people get sorted. And I was a horsemanship director, so I was up at the barn, and we had trail rides all day, but we didn't hire a lot of extra staff. So when I wasn't at the barn, I was in the kitchen, and she was in the kitchen. And Sunday morning would come along, and we would just sit at the back of the room, whatever they were doing, and take in church with them. So sometimes it was quite enjoyable and lively, and other times it was a more subdued group, and we said, we're gonna pay attention. We're gonna learn something and get something from God. And then there come this little stretch of time where we didn't have any retreat groups. And Sunday came, and since we didn't have any plans, we didn't actually do anything. We said, let's see if there's something on TV. Had this little tiny black and white TV with an antenna. Got 3 channels, 2 of them worked. One of them was a lot like radio. You could hear stuff, but you couldn't see much. Anyway, we found something religious on TV, and we did that. And then the next week, and again, since we didn't really have plans, we just stayed home, watched it on TV. And this went on for a couple of weeks, and we just had to give ourselves a shake. We weren't a part of a local church, so we didn't have a pastor. We didn't have a congregation family to call on us and knock on our door and say, hey, what are you up to? So we had to kind of shake ourselves out of that, and we went on down to Arden, found the Standard Church there, Pastor Rodney Peterson. Some of you know him. He's our guy in Belleville still. He was my pastor. I could tell you a couple stories about him, and you could chuckle when you see him next time. But anyway, my point of saying all that is that we need to put ourselves in the place of getting these fresh encounters with Jesus and not lose interest. Now here's the good news. Could you show us the next slide, please? The good news is that there's lots of Jesus for everyone. You don't have to feel like not me. Everybody else gets it. I don't get it. No. Stop that. There's lots of Jesus to go around. So we're here in John chapter 20, and as we read earlier, Jesus shows up to the disciples on the evening of the resurrection. Jesus blesses them with peace. I think peace be with you was probably just a really nice greeting all the time anyway, but it'd be kind of special coming from Jesus, wouldn't it? Not to mention that they were bouncing off the walls between fear and excitement. Shh, peace. And then he says something, they get all excited, and he's got to do it. Shh, peace be with you. Gives them that blessing. And another one of his commands to be sent out into the world, right? Apostolo. It means to be sent out. It's a compound word, means to be sent out. So the apostles were the sent out ones, and we have that ministry of being sent out. Thomas, however, was not among them. Now, I can think of a lot of good reasons why Thomas might not have been there. He might have been on some errand that kept him away. But I would like to point out that if you miss church, God might show up and wonder where you are. Just saying. If you miss church, you might miss something really neat that happened on that day. So you don't want to do that. I'm reading from verse 24. Now Thomas, called Didymus, and Didymus just means twin. So we expect that he had a brother or sister somewhere. Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So this follows right on. In John's telling of the story, he tells about Jesus showing up on the first day of the week to meet with them, and then he just carries right on. Now Thomas, so it's part of the same narrative, was not there when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." Or I just can't believe it. Now, we very much interpret Thomas's response as being full of doubt. And Jesus kind of said as much later. He says, hey, guy, don't have faith. Don't doubt, right? And so we get this doubting Thomas. And then sometimes by inference, we think that Thomas is a little bit lesser than the other disciples, and that's not really fair. Let me give you a couple reasons why, if you care. We know, by the way, almost nothing about Thomas. He's hardly at all mentioned in the Scripture, and there are some of the 12 that are mentioned even less than him. But here's what we do know about Thomas. First, that he's really brave. Earlier on, Jesus had been avoiding going to Jerusalem, because the time wasn't right yet, so he was staying out in the countryside. But on the occasion of the death of Lazarus, which was much closer to Jerusalem there in Bethany, Jesus says, I'm going to go and see about Lazarus. And everybody else went, yeah, well, when Jesus gets his mind set on something, it's a done deal. And so Thomas at that moment speaks up and says, well, then we might as well all go so we can just die together. Let's go, boys. Well, that was Thomas. It's kind of a brave thing to say. Secondly, Jesus admonishes all of them for their doubting of the news of the resurrection, right? So the women came, and that was big news. And then the guys came from Emmaus. They hurried on back and said, hey, wow, this happened. And again, the disciples doubted. So really, they were all doubted. So Thomas is no more or less than the other. So I said we don't read much about Thomas in the Gospels, but listen, friends, he was there every step of the way. He was there for every wave on the ocean. He was there for every miracle. He was at the Last Supper. He was in the garden. He was at the arrest. He scattered just like the rest of them. He had just as much, he'd given up just as much in terms of, family and lands or his career, whatever his career was. He'd given up just as much, and he'd risked just as much to be identified with Jesus as the rest of them. He had just as much to gain or lose by being a follower of Jesus. So we cut the guy a little slack, because he's kind of really just the same as everybody. And let's appreciate that for whatever reason he missed the encounter with Jesus, he was not satisfied that the others had met Jesus. He wanted his own encounter with Jesus. And I'm dangling that in front of you like a carrot to say, church, if somebody else is having sweet testimonies of Jesus and you're thinking, how come I don't have sweet testimonies of Jesus? Why don't you ask yourself again, how come I don't have sweet testimonies of Jesus? What am I missing out on here? Why am I missing out? Listen, there's plenty of Jesus to go around. So imagine the scene. Thomas comes back in the room. What? Jesus came? Oh, I'm so happy for you guys. That must have been wonderful that you got to see Jesus. Woo! Good for you. Good for you. Oh, by the way, here's the bagels that you sent me out to get. I brought them back for us. Yee, good, great. Jesus showed up. Or maybe, what? Jesus came? Here are the bagels you sent me out to get. Well, you guys were too afraid to go out and hiding up here with the doors locked for fear of the Jews. And I was the only one brave enough to go out and get something to eat. Or it could have been that. I don't know. We don't know what transpired in that moment. But here's some neat. We get to ask him. When you get to heaven, you want to, hey, what was that like, Thomas? Where did you go? I want to know. Probably didn't go out to buy lottery tickets. I'm going to say that probably wasn't it. But the good news is that there's lots of Jesus for everyone. And they, they didn't know anything. We know all kinds of stuff because we've been reading this for years, right? They are literally making it up as they go along. They don't know what's happening, what's going to happen. So verse 26 says, a week later, 7 days, a week later. By the way, do you think Thomas or anybody else left the group in those days? Like, I'm not going anywhere. Somebody else can go get the bagels today. I'm sticking around here. I'm not missing a thing. Verse 26, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Yep. Though the doors were locked, so they're still living in fear. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came in and stood among them and said, peace be with you, because, again, it was quite startling, I'm sure. Then Jesus said to Thomas, put your fingers here. See my hands. Reach out and put your hand into my side. Stop doubting and believe. So Jesus comes, he greets everyone, then he turns deliberately to Thomas. I love it. Could you show us the first slide? We miss that. Can you show us the next slide? Here we are. And Jesus turns deliberately to Thomas. Put your fingers here. See my hands. Reach out. Put your hand in my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. And we have no record of Thomas actually needing to reach out and touch Jesus. Apparently, he's convinced. But it was great that Jesus made the offer. Thomas, do you need that? Buddy, if that's what you need, come on. So it's interesting because it also shows that while Jesus was not there previously when Thomas said those words, Jesus knew exactly what Thomas said. So by the way, the next time you're in the kitchen working with somebody on something and you're having a conversation, Jesus is present enough to know what you said, what you're saying, okay? Jesus was completely aware of Thomas, his words, his needs, his desires, his heart. okay? You're out there, whatever you're doing in the yard, banging on a tractor or trying to dig up that rock, and Jesus knows what you're going through. So what's kind of neat about this, and I think John probably purposely included this story because it's almost as if Jesus made this trip especially for Thomas. He came back for Thomas. Leave no man behind. And Thomas exclaimed, "My Lord and my God." By the way, this also occurred to me. If Thomas was anything like me, if I was Thomas, he'd have been very grumpy all week. What's wrong with him? Oh, I remember last Sunday he missed it when Jesus came. Oh, yeah. Better give him some room. Why did I miss? So Jesus came back for Thomas because there's lots of Jesus for everyone, people. Wouldn't it be great if we had that kind of passion? Like, I don't care, I'm getting some. I don't care, I'm not going to miss it. I'm not going to leave till I get some. And until I reach out and touch Jesus. And we have this strong passion, and sometimes we do have this strong passion, and sometimes it just comes naturally to us, but sometimes we have to work on it, right? I mean, there would have been time, when I first got saved, I'll eventually tell you all my story, but I quite literally went to some church or prayer meeting 7 days a week when I was in high school. I just was that kind of guy. And then here a few years later, we're at the ranch going, oh, it's Sunday already? Wow. So sometimes we have it naturally, that desire, and sometimes we have to work on it. And Sunday, people, just the reminder of Sunday, just the routine of Sunday is good for me. It's good for you. It reminds me to fast from the things of the world and feast on the things of God. Why? Because it's Sunday. Oh yeah, don't forget. Right? Quit the things of the world and cling to the things of God. Come on, just 1 day a week. Let's get a tune-up. And then in verse 29, Jesus loops in the people of Coal Lake. Did you know that? He mentioned you in the scriptures. Verse 29. Because Jesus told Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those in Coal Lake who have not seen and yet have believed. That's good. That's us. By the way, don't discount miracles, though. You might get to see plenty in your lifetime, right? So you get to see as well. So let's just push pause for a moment and think, well, now what about us and our passion level? Let's take our temperature for a moment and check our spiritual fervor. You don't get a fever, but you do get fervor. You need to take your temperature to check your spiritual fervor. Am I desperately eager to encounter Jesus? Or if I missed, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Am I burning hot, or am I just a little bit growing cold? Is there a possible loss of interest? Come on now, got to kick myself and get her going again. And it's good to have people that are thinking about you. By the way, if you've been missing here, I'm going to say I just know you guys well enough to know that if you've been missing here, somebody else has been thinking about you. It's a church that thinks about each other, right? Don't let each other go. So we could have this sort of loss of interest. Now there's another condition that concerns me, and I just want to mention it because I think it is important for somebody. Sometimes people think they are on the outs with God, right? They're on the outs with God, and he doesn't want to meet with them. So sometimes we think things aren't so good between us and God, right? Me and God right now, and he's probably doesn't want to hear from me. You're wrong. You're wrong. I know you feel that way. You just feel like I don't want to really go back and see him. I think Thomas felt a little foolish probably when the thing happened. But think of Thomas. So you've been missing. Think of Thomas. Now, you know what? Missing Jesus was not his finest hour on Resurrection Sunday, but here's what. It came right after his other not-so-great hours, abandoning Jesus, between the Last Supper and the crucifixion. For the past week, everybody else has been quite buoyant. Woo-hoo, wasn't that great? About Jesus, he came here. Everybody else is feeling pretty good. Not Thomas. He's just not there, you know. He just can't enter in. Why didn't Jesus include me? I mean, I just missed it by, 30 minutes. Jesus could have waited. Well, these things, we upset ourselves with these thoughts, right? Well, let me say this. It could be true that you shot yourself in the foot because you missed out on something pretty neat. You could have been there and you stayed home. That could have happened. But guess what? Maybe God had something else in mind. I mean, maybe the people of Coal Lake needed this story, so somebody had to miss. It ended up being Thomas, just so Jesus could come back and tell the rest of the story. So if that's you, here's some good news. You're not dead yet, so you're not done yet. Don't be writing your own, don't be crawling under the ground yet. There's lots of Jesus for everyone. Begin again. Begin again. You know what I suspect? It took a while for the apostles to kind of just get sorted out after the crucifixion, resurrection, that whole weekend, and get themselves back together. There was another 30 days from this point. There was another 30 or 27 or 28 days to the ascension of Jesus when he rose up into heaven. And by the way, in that time, there was a fishing trip and a men's breakfast. So I'm not sure who's on that day, but there's a fishing trip and a men's breakfast. And pickerel season opens today, just saying. And then there was another 10 days after the ascension to Pentecost. So it can take a little while, all right? Just go easy on yourself. If you need to make a comeback, if you need to make a comeback, and take a little while to get back to where you want to be. But let me remind you that fresh, ongoing encounters with Jesus are necessary for fresh, ongoing faith. Gotta have it. Gotta have it. And since you're not dead yet, you're not done yet, there's lots of Jesus for everyone, and so let's begin again. Last slide. You're so good. We're getting to know each other. What's Father saying to you today? I've been talking. Hopefully you'll be listening to God while I'm talking. What's Jesus saying? What are you going to do about it? Because what really matters is not that we're hearers of the word, but that we're doers of the word. Dale, would you come and help us with the last song?